All right. So before we actually start the Midrash, remember from Devarim 8 verse 10, which says, "So you eat and be satisfied. And you'll bless Adonai your God for the good land He has given you." Sort of, we have the opposite sort of scripture experience today, reading from that, saying that in some situations you will not eat and be satisfied. We have eaten and we're satisfied. Let's thank Abba. We do thank you for the blessing of food you've given us today. We thank you we've eaten and we're satisfied. We thank you for the land. It's in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right. So this is what we read today from Torah portion, double Torah portion, Behar-Bechukotai. And first verses of each of the two. So who can spot the word Behar on this screen in the Hebrew text? You see the English down below. Which word is it on the Hebrew text?
I can't even see the screen.
Is it mount or on?
It's either on or in the mountain. So if you look on the top line of the Hebrew, starting from the right side, 1, 2, 3-4, 5. The fifth word there is the word Behar. Bet, hey, or resh.
Okay.
Well, I said a dash. The El Moshe I counted as 4 and 5.
Oh, I see it.
1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Fifth word from that. Or if you go from the left to right, the end of it be the third word in is the word Behar. And for Bechukotai, it's, as you see, it's the second word there. It's im Bechukotai, the if, and then Bechukotai, if my regulations you live by, or you walk, really. Telachu, the root word of telachu is halak, if you will, which is the word to walk out. So if you walk by my regulations, it'd be a better way to say that, or perhaps translate that more directly.
So is it the Bechukotai or whatever that is? How does that, is that like a?
It's putting it in the future tense. If you live by them, if you walk by my regulations, it's part of the conditional part of the im Bechukotai.
So the chukot is the regulation part, like that?
Yeah, chukot is chuch or hoch
Mhm.
is the regulations part of it. Yeah, the chukotai is if you live in my regulations, if you will.
So is that's what you're saying, is the chukot, so it's not just any old.
Yeah, chukot is plural of hook, so it's plural for chukot, and then my regulations is the tie part on it. So this was the portion that we read today. And you recognize this by an answer to the question. That screen come up. That's right. And this was is a translation, an alternate translation. This is from the ISR 98 Institute for Scripture Research. And so, question: how many mitzvot are in this Torah portion? Is it 36, as in 12, 24 plus 12, 24 Behar and 12 in Bechukotai? Is it 12 and 12, 22 and 18, or 42 and 24? Any votes for A, 36? Show of hands.
Are you voting?
No, I'm just saying how to vote. Raise your hand. Okay, none. How about the vote for B, 12 and 12? Okay, couple votes. 40 is 22 and 18. Is there? C.
I'll say that one.
Okay. And D, 66, 42 and 24.
Wayne only raised his hand for A, so there's no.
Is it an indicator? We'll see.
Let's see.
Well, okay, so first one out. First one out is D. We had no votes for that, so that's good. And, sorry.
Just want to vote for D.
Right. I knew it was.
D is out. And yes, I did give it away. It is A. Take a look at some of these, not all 36. So giving the land its rest during the 7th year is the positive command to rest, and the negative command to not do is to not work it. And as you probably remember from learning Israel's history, that was a big problem, right? Israel was exiled because they didn't rest the land during the 7th year, and they did work the land during the 7th year. And I'm concerned that the modern nation of Israel is repeating the same mistakes. Because, well, first of all, there is a thought as to why they're not doing it is that there is a theory, if you will, that the reason for not observing the Sabbath year rest in the land is that, is because the majority of Israel is not in the land right now. That's one view of it. But some are doing a sort of resting the land. What are they doing?
Giving it to a Gentile.
Yes, they're actually leasing the land or selling the land to, someone who's not Jewish. And so they are not working the land themselves, right? But is the land being worked?
The land's still not getting.
So, the idea is, well, it's not on my land. I'm not working. I'm not responsible for it. But the reason why did, in that case, then why did you lease the land to someone you knew would work it, right? So you may be able to say that you did not work the land, but you know that you did not give the land its rest. You may not have worked it, but you did not get the land. The land did not get its rest, and you're still responsible for it. Do not gather self-growth, can't be spelled. Self-growth grapes. Say that 15 times fast, right? And because they are because the exile is basically, there are multiple views as to when the Jubilee year is, right? You've seen that. There may be some better than others, but Israel has lost the count. And so it's hard to know how to count the years. There are some good theories out there, but that mitzvah, because of the exile, has been, I think, reduced in terms of its ability to keep it or made it more difficult to keep it. I know that's going to be restored at some point. We'll know when that is at some point. But right now, that command has not been kept by Israel. Now, the word shofar does appear in the text of Vayikra 25:9, but I think The word there, though, is not Yom Kippur, though. It's what? Yom HaKippurim. Plural for your day of your atonements. Plural. It's not Yomim Kippurim, as in days of atonement. It's day of atonements. That makes sense. So the mitzvah here, to not reap after the growth of the yovels in normal years. So you can, reaping and harvesting, I think, would be looking at that. That contains an idea of a not intensified, but an effort to glean all the things as if it wasn't the Jubilee year. Can you eat the fruit of the field, if you will, the grain of the field during the Yovel?
Well, it says you're not supposed to gather.
Yeah, I think that's really speaking about the effort, the same as you would harvest as a normal year, as doing a harvest. You don't do the harvest. And the command to let the land rest comes with the promise that you get extra to store, but you can also not reap it, but you can use whatever grows naturally during the Yovel. And if you don't know when the Yovel is, it's difficult to set it apart, right? Difficult to sanctify it in 25:12.
So do you mean that you cannot, I'm kind of confused. Are you saying that you can't use, you're saying like you don't go in like harvest, like that you can go and use, to pick what you need?
Whatever comes up naturally, you can use that.
Okay.
But it's not the same as reaping and harvesting, that sort of thing. It's that's what's not allowed during that time. There is the mitzvah of buying and selling. What's the context of that?
That's a very confusing part there. I'm really excited to learn about this.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it means, the price of, when you take a vow, what does that mean?
Well, selling the property.
Yeah, this is not talking about 25:14. If you sell anything to your neighbor or buy anything from them, neither are you to exploit the
Oh,
other.
yeah, like, okay.
You're talking about
Yeah, I'm talking later on, yeah.
Later on. But what that is about is if you are valuing the value of a person, you're not really valuing, you're not giving the person per se, you're giving the value of the person. So if I were to devote this, a person, you're basically paying the value of that person, not necessarily the person becomes a servant to the
Okay, so
Kohanim, so to
it
speak.
sounds like giving a slave to the temple or something like that. I'm like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
really, that's not.
Yeah. Mhm. That's why the valuation is there,
Okay.
because you're giving the value of that person. So there's a couple things of not exploiting one another, and in traditional, within traditional Judaism, the idea of exploiting one another in speech is in 25:17. That's they would say that it's implied by the text, which reads this way. It says, "Thus you're not to take advantage of each other, but you're to fear your God, for I am Adonai your God." The words in speech don't directly appear here, so the interpretation by the sages is in speech, to take advantage of someone. So someone who may not be as to take advantage of someone might be exploiting their inability to communicate or their inability to respond to it. So the idea of not selling holdings in the land of Israel in perpetuity, that's because of something important that we read in our section. Essentially, Israel doesn't own Israel, right? They're essentially leasing the land from Yah, who owns land. And so he, as the landowner, has some stipulations that they're supposed to do, and it's part of the lease agreement, which they didn't adhere to, so that got them, well, the sheriff came out and they were evicted.
And what, the word perpetuity,
Yeah, as in
How was
le'olam va'ed, as in forever.
Okay.
You can't, in other words, you can't sell the land forever, because if you can't sell out your land forever if you are one in, in a tribe. You can't sell your land to a foreigner, nor to even someone from another tribe. It's going to come back, if it's not redeemed, it'll come back in the Yovel, in the Jubilee year. Now, the phraseology here of not loaning to your brother at interest, there is something that is best to look at the whole passage on, right? The idea of context here is important. So what is the context of not loaning to your brother at interest? Well, it's in 25:37 is where the text itself is. So let's start with a couple of verses before that, see what the context is. Verse 35, if a member of your people has become poor, so that he can't support himself among you, you are to assist him as you would a foreigner or a temporary resident, so that he can continue living with you. Do not charge him interest or otherwise profit from him, but fear your God, so your brother can continue living with you. Do not take interest when you loan him money, or take a profit when you sell him food. I'm Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, in order to give you the land of Canaan and be your God. So what's then the context of don't loan to your brother at interest?
if he becomes poor and falls into poverty?
Yeah, so essentially you are, someone that,
It's a way of enslaving them.
right, someone comes to you and says, I can't support myself. And so if you give him an interest-bearing loan, or you, as it says here, or take profit when you sell him food. So, oh, well, I've got plenty of food. That can of, Maccabee beer, I'll sell it to you for $10. I will take, I can give you money for your rent. Okay, so your rent is $500. Well, payable, it'll be $750, payable next month. That would be exploiting the ability to you gave him the money, or you lent him the money, but it wasn't something out of charity or love you're doing. You're basically saying, I can take advantage of this guy. He is desperate. He is desperate for it. He'll, take any loan agreement just to pay this amount off. And I think that's what's being talked about here based on the context. If a member of people has become poor, so he can't support himself among you. So, questions or thoughts on that?
That makes a lot more sense.
It's kind of like when Joseph was enslaving Egypt to the Pharaoh. Because it's like, oh, you don't have any money to buy grain? Well, you can give us this. We own your land. And then at the end, it's, well, you need food to eat. Well, you all belong to Pharaoh now.
Now you're working Pharaoh's land, not yours.
Yeah. That's why it says you shouldn't subject them to slave service, because slave service is what they were in Egypt.
So he didn't do that to the Israelites, or did he do it to Israelites too?
No, but Joseph did it to all of Israel when they were doing the years of famine.
You know,
That's how Pharaoh got all his land. didn't he?
Egypt though, not Israel.
No, it's Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was before Israel became Israel, but
Okay.
everyone who was in Egypt gave all they had to Joseph for Pharaoh's storehouse.
Right, yes.
And in the end, they all had to go to Pharaoh to get food. They had nothing. And that's why God said, don't make your fellow Israelite into a slave like you were in Egypt.
Mhm. So you're saying it's kind of like a shrewd business practice for people that are not, but not your brethren. I mean, is that what?
Well, they seem to have no problem with enslaving non-Israelites.
Right.
You're not your brother,
Right,
because they say you can have a slave that's from the nations,
right.
but you're not to do it to your brothers.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And even in the, a lot of prophetic, don't they even mention that Israel will have slaves of other nations during, or it says that they will serve them. That so and so and so will serve you, like in the, and it seems like that. It seems to, imply it,
I don't know if slave status is the same as employee status.
Yeah.
Usually, no. I mean, a slave is someone who obviously doesn't get paid for their work. An employee, you can leave anytime you want.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember what it's saying.
But you're still not to but as you read the text here, you're not to, even if someone has sold themselves as a slave to you from a fellow Hebrew, you're not allowed to mistreat them. That's clear from the
Right.
text.
Well, to me, that's the whole question of like slavery is not about whether slavery, I mean, obviously scripturally slavery is allowed, but it's how you treat the slave.
Yeah.
To me, it seems,
Yeah, because somewhere else it even sets out that slave of you take of another nation. If he runs away from you to another master, you're not to go after him.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where America really went wrong. I mean, that law they made about, was it, I can't remember where they were trying to say.
Dred Scott, I think.
Yeah, the Dred Scott decision, that was so unbiblical.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as it says in 25:53, you can, if you get so entangled, you need to sell yourself even to a foreigner who's living in the land. You can do that, but you're not allowed, that foreigner is not allowed to oppress the Israelites and has to give them up, and same rules of land apply.
And if one of the Israelites' kinfolks want to redeem him from the foreigner has to allow that. You can't just say, no, he's mine.
Is it out of place for, we read all these things about oppression of strangers. What about, does it change the text here? It seems like a bit of a change when it goes to chapter 25, 26, which says, you're not to make yourself any idols, erect a carved statue or a standing stone, or place any carved stone anywhere in your land, nor to bow down to it. I am Adonai your God. So it goes from the redemption procedures for being enslaved to kind of a change, if you will, about idolatry. Is there? And then it goes back into
I
about,
guess you could make an argument for if you go into idolatry, you are selling yourself into slavery to that idol,
But-
whatever.
but you're allowed to sell yourself if necessary, but you're not allowed to bow down to a foreign god. So maybe there is a connection between,
So
if
you're
you
not
sell
supposed to
yourself-
sell yourself to that, you can sell to other people, but
Well, someone living in your land is is a foreigner living in the land is under the regulations of the land. So he's still not allowed to be a pagan, if you will, worshiping false deities in your land. Even if he is a foreigner, he's not allowed to do that. So perhaps this is saying, don't sell yourself to, outside your land. Possibly you don't have the same, the same amount of defenses, if you will. You're not protected by the Torah if you sell yourself to a Babylonian, for example, perhaps.
Bowing down to idols is another way of becoming a slave too.
So it seems a bit odd that the mitzvah to not bow down to an engraved stone or an idol, a standing stone, is here and not back in Vayikra or in Shemot chapter 20, right? Because Shemot 20, the famous 10 words, also has the idea of you're not to make for yourself a carved image or any kind of representation of anything in heaven above, on the earth below, or in the shoreline below the shoreline, to bow down to them or serve them. In chapter 20, Exodus 20, verse 3 and 4.
Scripture like that in a bunch of places. It's not necessarily one right after the other. Like something at the end could have been what happened actually at the beginning. It's not in chronological order or nothing like that.
No, but I think it's odd in my view that they would count, the rabbis would count the command to not bow down to an idol is from here, not from the 10 words, which is pretty, comes earlier and pretty clear as well. Either way, it's still they're both in the text, so whether they take it from here or another one doesn't matter, but it seems maybe odd to not take it there. But this is clear about a carved statue or a standing stone, and maybe it's more specific to the standing stone. That's why they brought it here. But idolatry is idolatry. You're not allowed to do it.
I think that's so vital right now for people to get a hold of that, because with the ideals that are going around nowadays that you can just do anything, saying and be forgiven or anything and be okay, and it seems so far off. I mean, it used to seem so far off to have that problem in America, or saying that it's like, I think I'm constantly warning my children, and I think say that this is something you just can't do.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it. If someone says, you can't say, well, I don't mean in my heart, or I just don't, I did it just because I had to. I mean, just, what I'm saying?
Well, I think that could be I think that is current era Gnosticism, where you say that, well, in my heart is what matters, and that my actions don't matter. For example, doesn't matter what you do; it matters what you think, what you believe, or what your intentions were. You intended to, but you did this. But I intended to not hit her, but I did anyway. Because
what's true for you?
Yeah.
I pulled my punch. She moved into it. Yeah, that's modern era Gnosticism, I think. So this is the what you were talking about earlier was the 27, 1 through 8, the Torah of the valuation of consecrated persons. What I see is the defining verse here is verse 2. Your translation may read differently, but it says here, tell the people of Israel, if someone makes a clear defined vow to Adonai, to give him an amount equal to the value of a human being, and then that's where the valuation comes in. So I want to give you the value of a 60 years old. Okay, so if it's a 60-year-old male, it's 50 shekels. Weigh out your 50 shekels, with the sanctuary shekel being the standard. So I think if you want to read this passage of the idea of the sanctuary shekel being the standard, that's where the issue, in my view, of what happens with the Yeshua and the money changers, right? They are not giving the value of the, if you will, the Roman coins probably that were being traded for the sanctuary shekels. So they're taking advantage, or they're violating the passage to not take advantage or not exploit your brethren by giving them that, extremely bad exchange rate. And then, since they're getting that anyway, right? If you buy the bird for this amount, then you're paying that much, and then you're sacrificing the bird. If you're making a vow for that amount, a vow of a person, you're giving them the extra money, and then they're keeping the money anyway because you made that vow of it. So basically, just taking your money they're just taking extra money from that. I think that's
Because didn't he later say, "You made my father's house a den of thieves"?
Yeah.
So they were stealing money, not getting just what they were allowed to get.
Yeah, well, if you say the exchange rate is this and that, and it's, adding your 25% onto that, that's basically your theft. You're stealing that extra money,
Stealing. You're thieves. Yeah.
taking advantage.
In false balance or false weight, right? Well, is that the price, when it says takes a vow, what does that mean? Is that like an Nazarite vow or something like that? What is that?
What is a, a vow, of course, it's not a Nazarite vow. You can make a voluntary vow. The vow is always a voluntary thing you're making. You're making a vow, I will do this, to Yah. And so you're paying your vow. That's the idea of not making a rash vow. If you say, I'll vow the value of a 60-year-old man to the temple, then say, oh, well, I don't really have the 50 shekels to pay. And so that's where they're actually, this is kind of a vow that is a way out of a rash vow. For example, look at verse 8. If a person is too poor to be evaluated, set him before the Kohen, who will assign him a value in keeping with the means the person who made the vow. So that keeping within the means the person who made the vow is essentially allowing them to keep their vow affordable to them. If they make a vow for the value of this, and they're too poor, if the person's too poor to be evaluated, in terms of I value my own self, I'm giving myself away. I don't have the 60 shekels, or the 50 shekels, I don't have that much. Assign him a value in keeping with the means of the person who made the vow, in verse 8. So you can make a vow of yourself, but if you're too poor to pay what the going rate is, it looks like the priest can assign him a value in keeping with the means of the person who made the vow. You also make the vow in terms of animals, which is important, I think, for this. You're not necessarily always having to give the animal, but if you make the value of the animal, but it also you can give an actual animal as well, as it says many times here. But check out verse 11. If the animal is an unclean one, such as may not be used as an offering to Adonai, you must set it before the Kohen. The Kohen is to set a value on it in relation to its good and bad points. The value set by you, the Kohen will stand. You can make the vow of an animal, not one that's going to be sacrificed, but the value of, for example, a horse.
Oh, yes.
Something that would still be used in temple service, maybe like work animals, but not as sacrifices.
Yeah, if it's but this is not an ox. This is not that kind of. It's an unclean one.
Yeah. Well, they had to have horses to draw things too, not just ox.
Right. So you're giving the value of an animal that can't be offered as a sacrifice.
Now, one place where we actually see, a person being given, to the temple for a vow was, Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that would have been like, how would you say it? Because do you think that it was starting off as maybe the value, or do you think it was always she was planning on giving Samuel directly to the temple?
It seems, I mean, that seems to be a different case of not
Different
giving the
case.
value of a person, but giving the person,
Okay.
dedicating that person
Mhm.
himself to that. And so this is essentially if you look at it that way, these are the price of redemption for not going to work for the Cohen, for example.
Okay.
So lots of Torah of valuations who kind of talked about it. But what is it in 27:28? What is the mitzvah there? Do not sell the cherem. What does that mean? The text says, however, nothing consecrated unconditionally which a person may consecrate. So it means cherem is the word for like a devoted thing. Nothing consecrated unconditionally which a person may consecrate out of all that he owns, a person and will freely possesses, he is to be sold or redeemed. Because everything consecrated unconditionally is especially holy. So in other words, you can't sell again what is you've been devoted unconditionally. Same thing, that's the next part of it. You can't sell it, you can't redeem it back either. It's devoted unconditionally. And the cherem vow is the devoted unconditional vow from, as I keep reading in the later part of the chapter here. That was in the Moft here.
Meaning you can't redeem back what you give to the temple, but
If it's devoted unconditionally, then that's the case. It can't be, as well as the tithe to the herd. In verse 32, all the tenth from the herd of the flock, whatever passes under the shepherd's crook, the tenth will be holy to Adonai. The owner is not to inquire whether the animal is good or bad. He can't exchange it. He does exchange it. Both it and when he's substituted for it will be holy. It can't be redeemed. So it doesn't really say here in the text, at least, what does it mean to not be able to be redeemed? Does it mean that both are? You try to substitute something you can't. You basically give both of them up, or what does it mean? Are they for the do they become, if you will, food for the priest? It doesn't really say here what happens to those.
Well, on 29, where it talks about the person who's doomed to destruction,
Yeah.
cannot be redeemed, is that what it's talking, like some, like, I mean, was there, like, someone who had done something terrible, I mean, would that be called, why would he be called holy to the Lord?
Well,
Unless-
the idea is that he's going to be killed.
Mhm.
He can't be redeemed. You can't pay the 50 shekels of his value to get him out of the death sentence. So it's a unique case of not being redeemable in that sense. You can't pay your way out of a death sentence.
That
But
sounds a
it
lot.
doesn't say the same. It doesn't for the animals here, the herd of the flock. It says it can't be redeemed, but it doesn't say what they're supposed to do to them. It seems implied that it would be sacrificed and become, sacrificed to Yah, and so become typically food for the priests and Levites. But it doesn't say that for certain here.
That doesn't, I mean, what kind of implication does that have when, as far as Yeshua's redeeming us by his, I'm saying,
Mhm.
us, bound for destruction, condemned to death because of our sin. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's as if Yeshua was sent in our place for death.
But, I mean, it almost sounds like he was charged with it before we existed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because the way it sounds like it's almost as if it was, well, it's happening from the foundations of the world, he was slain. I think it gives a lot of
Yeah.
credence to this verse. The legality, I guess when I say that it's totally, it was a very legal transaction.
It was his death was counted as payment for ours, so to speak. It's not really that he is, I don't think it's as, it is a, he is the Redeemer. But it's not as if that he's paying God anything. He's not paying the Father anything.
Right. Yeah.
He's redeemed. We are redeemed. It's not that if it's a payment for him, but it's simply the act of redemption, of substitution, of taking all our debts and putting it on himself, so to speak.
Right. I mean, it makes it,
All of our sins, putting it on himself, the death that causes, sin causes death.
right. That would be, that means it seems like it is so, I guess I'm trying, I've been kind of amazed by the, our legal system is based on the Torah. I mean, it was at first. And it's amazing to me that how God is very, all these things, he just is so down the line. Everything he does is so, he told you so, he wrote it, he told the prophets, he said what he was going to do, and,
Yeah.
he did it just like he's, it's very legal, And I'm just amazing.
Yeah, all punishment is not willingly, it's above board. It's everything that was, I told you this was gonna happen,
Yeah.
and now it's happening. I told you this is gonna happen now, and it's happening now. Or I told you the future, or I told you, I'm sorry, in the past, it will happen in the future, and here it is. It's the
Yeah.
future.
And it's like these decrees, from the decrees, like you see these things, like even now, I mean, like, like Jonathan Consberg, how it talks about these decrees that go out, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's just so, the person that's in charge of the nation or speaking for the nation gives these decrees, and it's like, I don't know, it's amazing.
Well, I think that in verse 27, 29, it does seem that what we try to do today is not carry those sentences out, in the sense that what is a righteous act of upholding the scripture, there's always, well, he was poor, so we can't sentence him.
Which a lot of times it seems to cause a reverse sense of justice, because the person who is not guilty is usually, a lot of times, the one that pays for,
Yeah.
what,
All right, let's continue then. Well, I do think, as you probably know, I do think a lot of the sentencing that Oklahoma has done in the past, in terms of the sentencing for death sentences, is not really above board. So the sentencing has to be correct also for the penalty to be right, carried out. All right, so Behar can be in or on the mountain. The word, the bet at the beginning of the word can be in or on. It is like, for example, JPS, Jewish Publication Sign 1917, doesn't say on Mount Sinai, it says in Mount Sinai in the English translation, because it can be in or on. The word hara, it's to stand on top of, or mount or mountain. There's also related har for mount, and hara, is pregnant or to conceive. So if you look at perhaps the woman's belly, if you will, it has it as enlarged when she is pregnant. That's why it's the word hara, or a similar word to mountain. So what is the connection? We've talked about this before, but if you remember, what is the connection between American history and this Torah portion?
Emancipation Proclamation.
That is incorrect. Yes. Yes.
Taxation without representations.
Well, I guess you could say, based on the valuations of things, might be the case, but that's not what I'm looking for here.
Unjust taxes.
What's that thing where a person's socially, what's the thing where you will get money if someone else dies? Ensuring a person.
Oh, we have a gallon?
We have earthly laws as well.
Insurance.
Well-
The American, Native Americans?
What I was looking for was the Liberty Bell.
Oh,
Came liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. Leviticus 25:10. Inscribed on the Liberty Bell.
Wesley would have got that.
Right. So here's a statement by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Schneerson. Our sages tell us the 7-year Shemitah cycle corresponds to the 7 millennia of history. For 6,000 years, man labors in the fields of the material world in preparation for the 7th millennium, a millennium that is holy Sabbath and tranquility for life everlasting, the era of Mashiach.
Yom Shekalot Shabbat.
Thus the question, what shall we eat in the 7th year? Can be asked on the historical plane as well. If the spiritual giants of earlier generations and patriarchs and matriarchs, the prophets, the sages of the Talmud, failed to bring about a perfect world, what can be expected of us? If the first 5 millennia of history could not provide for the universal Sabbath, what can be expected of us, we of the 6th year, exhausted and depleted of spirit? Yet the 6th year will be the one to yield and sustain the 7th, precisely because our resources are so meager. Our every trial and achievement is so much more meaningful, so much more precious to God. He therefore promises to command his blessing to our efforts so that they shall nourish the sabbatical millennium and beyond.
That's kind of nice.
Okay, so here's kind of a, go through a listing of a kind of a summary of the what we've read in terms of the agricultural and sabbatical instructions. Every 7th year is a Shemitah, literally to leave, abandon, or to lie fallow. Sabbath year, which the land will rest. After 7 Shemitah cycles, you have a Yovel, a Jubilee. And the land labors are bought and sold according to the remaining years of the Yovel. That means essentially, as we talked about, it's basically leasing the land or leasing that for a certain amount of years. That's the valuation of it. So as it says directly in the text, it's the number of crops,
Number of harvests.
number of harvests that you're supplying. Yeah. So this is kind of a listing of when things were. When is the next one? Could be based on this. As we talked about, there's 20. It was said by on the rabbinical count, at least a rabbinical count was 21-22 was a sabbatical year. In Daniel Gregg's scroll of biblical chronology, it was 2021 was the most recent one, and Jim Barfield's calendar had 2019-2020 as the Shemitah year. As I said, the rabbinical count phrase gives a false impression.
with it?
Say again?
Does COVID have anything to do with this?
We all
COVID,
rest.
COVID, yeah. Again, widespread disagreement of that.
Looks like there would be some sort, maybe not a positive identifier, but some kind of identifier, because the 6th year is going to be a boom year, producing enough for you to eat for 3 seasons on.
That's 2019.
So if you could look back through history and see, okay, where were those? Did we have any that would last for 3 seasons without any more crops?
Well, I mean,
Shiva's birth.
the question you might ask
Shiva's birth.
is starting back in when Israel occupied the land, why didn't they ever give the land its rest?
Well, at first they were fighting all the time.
Right, but
Was it because they wanted to get more out of it?
well, I don't have an answer. I don't know. I mean, if they had the Torah and it told them that they would get the blessing in the 6th year, do they get the blessing and still work the 7th year, or did they not get the blessing for some reason? From that-
Even if they hadn't ever done it, and they got kicked out of the land, and when they went back when it was reestablished as a
Nehemiah,
nation,
yeah.
they should have made that a Jubilee year.
I don't know if you can count that as, okay, now we're starting at 1 because we're back in the land. 1 started back then when we're studying.
But if
You
they
can't
lost
just go,
track,
they might go back in the real 5th year and say, all right, we're back. So this first year we're back, we're gonna start this year 1. No, it started way back before then.
But we don't, but the problem is, it's the why didn't they, right? If they knew they were kicked out of the land because of not keeping the annual or the 7th year land rest Sabbath, why didn't they start it
off
in the
right?
beginning of Ezra and Nehemiah's time period?
What was it that the kings weren't?
Did they start it and it's not written that they did? I don't know.
That's a possibility.
Well, they got kicked out again.
We know, right, we know from the, you would think, I mean, it seems to me that if they knew the reason the kid being kicked out, as we read about them doing it, they knew they weren't doing it right, it should be, I would think it'd be in the second, in the time since then, it would have said, well, we started keeping the 7th year Sabbath in the 7th year of King whatever's reign, or something like that,
Yeah.
The problem, if you will look at it this way, when Israel came back from Ezra and Nehemiah's time period, they were sort of under control of a foreign power, right? I mean, the Persians had conquered the Babylonians, and it was under King Cyrus that they came back. Did he allow them to keep the Shemitah year? You would think he would have. He's letting them go back to do that. We don't know exactly when that was.
And if
So
when they're not.
the question is, when did they lose track of the Sabbath year? Was it at the end of the first temple, or did they lose it only at the end of the second temple period?
Maybe it's something that you can't figure it out until he reestablishes it again.
Well, is there anything that Yeshua said to give any hint about anything like that? I mean, when he was on the earth, did he give
When
any
they
statement about it?
first went down into the land as Israel, as a nation, a lot of that land was uncultivated, had not been used. So they could have called it a 0 year.
But would that have been the real thing
No,
that God started?
no.
Well, one thing I have read is when you look at chronology since the second temple period, or during that time, of later chronology written by the rabbis, is that there is an attempt to make the destruction of the temple during a Jubilee year. And so in that counting, they counted the year 69 as a Jubilee year. And the temple was destroyed in 70, not 69. But that's where a difference in counting comes from, the idea of wanting to make it to be a Jubilee year.
That would kind of correlate with the manna that they received in the desert. How that, when they gathered the extra manna that was, to be for the Sabbath, they, when they did that, it went rotten, it went bad. I wonder if there's a correlation there with the temple being destroyed there because of what they did, trying to, not letting the land rest.
Well, how many years though was it, when they were expelled the last time? How many years was it till 1948 or when it was they were back?
I haven't done the calculation on it, I don't know. And when would you count the expulsion? When the temple was destroyed, or when they wouldn't let them,
Yeah.
the Sanhedrin wouldn't meet?
There's a lot of, okay, this could be a start, that could be a start. Which one was the start?
Because they may not have been in the land, but they could remember until 300 or something, 352 or something like that. Even the Romans still let the Sanhedrin meet.
Like, when they sowed
At
up
some
salt and all that and made it, unusable, or was that just figure of speech or, it seems like they did something didn't they literally like did something to the land itself, like, to make, unprofitable, unusable, I mean, it seems like almost like this huge, like, it's not even gonna be used, you know what I'm saying, like, I mean, because they had to just do so much to get it back.
Well,
They'll have to be responsible.
I mean, even when they were letting the Sanhedrin meet, Israel didn't control the land. They wouldn't first they wouldn't let Jews in Jerusalem, and then they basically banished them from what could be considered Judea. And so they weren't allowed to keep any of the laws of the land, so to speak, or that part, because the land basically was occupied at that time. And so it's easy perhaps if you're not counting it every 7 years, so you can't control it, that's perhaps why it's lost, so to speak. But the idea of trying to force the Jubilee year to be in the year 69, that causing, it seems like it's contrived, if you will, to have that force thing. You want to make it a theological statement about it, and therefore that's what you're saying, when it may not have been, you're basically making it up.
Right. Well, with the capital being finally in Jerusalem, would that have anything to, because that, in some ways, that was really significant.
Well, I think that it's a time, Israel is still in exile until the
So Messiah
Tabernacle.
comes back.
I would say until Israel was in exile in Daniel's time period, and they came back and occupied Jerusalem and restarted the temple service. And even though they were under the control of the Persians, it was a Persian territory, they still were able to start that. And so as long as the Temple Mount remains occupied by Islam, then Israel is still I would say technically still in exile to this day.
Were they observing the correct year during the reign of King David?
By correct year, you mean?
The correct sabbatical year?
I would assume so.
So it looks like there would be a lot of records somewhere from King David and
Well,
his next successors.
Well, but see, I mean, did they know when the sabbatical year was, or were they keeping it? Because David's
No.
reign,
In my mind, keeping it is keeping it right. If you're not keeping it right, you're not keeping it. So,
but it doesn't seem that they were, because in that sense, because
even in David's time,
because that the 490 years counts from the time of occupation. They didn't keep 70 Sabbath years, or 490 years of not keeping it from entering into the land until the exile to Babylon.
so there was no time Israel ever kept it.
I don't know that there was. And it seems like there was if they were, it was so long ago. I mean, the 490 years would be, back to, roughly 1000
Adam and
BCE.
Eve.
No, maybe not that early, but it's hard to, figure out a time when they did keep the land of Sabbath. Maybe if it was the 490 years going back from when we think the Babylonian captivity occurred, it would have been, in the 1000 BCE time period. So maybe during David's time they did. Looking at because if you look at when Israel came into the land, sometime between 1600 and 1400 BCE, depending on the Exodus chronology, right? Maybe they kept it for some period of time and then were kicked out of it.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me if they didn't, though, because wasn't it said that they didn't keep Sukkot during the time of David? Maybe I'm saying,
Well, I think that's Hezekiah, isn't it? And they,
Well, I mean,
Josiah.
well, when it didn't say that it hadn't been kept.
Yeah.
So it would stand to reason that they may have left off some other very important things.
Yeah,
You
true.
know, but I was also gonna say, wasn't,
If they're not keeping Passover, they're probably not keeping any of the commands, right?
well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, what do you call it, the most, what do you call it, nominal or Jewish. But the scripture you read earlier in Luke, wasn't that the year of Jubilee? I mean, when Yeshua said, this is the good and acceptable year of the Lord, I mean, it wasn't that the year of Jubilee?
Because it kind of reads that way.
So, I mean, I'm surprised that, they couldn't take from there, I'm saying, and go,
Well, but no one knows precisely the year that was, right?
yeah, that's.
It wouldn't surprise me that they've never actually kept it. They've never actually occupied the full promised land either. So,
That's true. There's a huge portion. I mean, what is like, that,
Well, supposedly during Solomon's reign, Israel may have, his control of land may have extended all the way to the Euphrates, from the Wadi of Egypt to the Euphrates River.
Yeah.
At some point, I would say not the entire land, but some of it at least.
yeah, I mean, that would make sense if that's not, I mean, if what is the land, I mean, in the Torah, what is considered, the entire, that's what it gives right between, yeah,
River to river.
Have you ever heard of any of the Jews keeping that outside the land? Like during times of the sages or, before Israel was a nation?
I've not read about them keeping it outside the land at all. I would say that it's, from a practical perspective, it's good to practice that.
Yeah.
But it's the same.
Well, good
It's the
for
same
land,
way.
yeah.
I think it's the same way as it's a bit different than some mitzvot are. Shabbat is universal. You can observe every time and place,
no matter where you're at.
no matter where you're at. But you can't technically keep Passover in the same way. Right?
You can't really keep all of the feasting without.
No, right. And it will also seem that, these commands for the land are for the land specifically.
Yeah.
But it would also be true that it would be from the Wadi of Egypt, to the Euphrates where this is to be kept at some point. It doesn't mean that outside of those boundaries, it couldn't be kept as well to some degree. Same
Like you
way.
said with the farming even, that's good husbandry over here. Let your land rest and recoup. It's good husbandry.
It is.
But you're not condemned by God for not doing it because he commands you to do it for the land, not here.
That's right.
Right.
'Cause
That's where,
The idea of the apple of his eye is Jerusalem comes from scripture. And so it's not that he doesn't love Altus, but
well, it also is that its truths are universal and its laws are universal. So if you're obeying it, you're going to get the blessing of doing it.
Maybe, but you can't blame God for not blessing you.
Right.
And he didn't say he would curse you for not doing it in Altus,
yeah. No, right.
but still, it's a good practice
Right.
if that's what you.
well, it seemed though, that I don't want to bring them up, I'm sorry, but Jonathan Cahn's theories seem amazingly, as far as the timeline, like say for America and her Shemitah, if there is, it's almost like he establishes that there can be different, people in people's like lives, like the, but the whole, the events of things, the calamities that happened,
It's
set
cycles.
7 years apart.
Mhm.
It seemed like it was absolutely, this, kind of like that, if you will serve me, things will be better. If you don't, it's going to be worse. And it's, mentioned 7 times, so this theme of 7, seemed to be replete, through, I don't know, just.
I'm reading the comments of a funny guy on YouTube who's commenting on our video. He thinks we're Muslims. hilarious. All right, well, let's go ahead and close our study and enjoy some grape juice from Hopla. Let's pray first. We thank you for the blessing of allowing us to Midrash together. Thank you for all your blessings. In Yeshua's name, amen.
I think somewhere it was commanded that we use wine too.
I think it's fruit of the vine.
How do you justify buying?
I'm pretty sure that